Hello, media entrepreneurs. It's another day of opportunity. Today, I'm looking forward to talking with Jakub Parusinski, who is managing director of a media consultancy, Janomics Media, based in London. What interests me about Jakub is the rich variety of his educational background and work experience. He studied business and economics as an undergraduate and then got master's degrees in political science and business administration. He was the editor and then the CEO of an English language business publication in Ukraine, and later he worked in London for the world famous business consultancy McKinsey and Company. He's board chairman of a media development foundation based in Ukraine that helps build ethical, sustainable media in Central and Eastern Europe where there is low press freedom. So I wanted to get his perspective on the future of journalism and see if he had any advice for young people interested in entering the profession. I interviewed him via Zoom, and he was in London where he lives with his wife and their 3-month-old baby. Okay, so you got into journalism after being in business. I mean, you studied business. You were not really, as an undergraduate, you went to France, I guess.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a complicated story, but don't have a journalism background. I did a few masters, so there is a little bit of diversity there. I did economics first, then political science, and finally an MBA. So it was very heavily business focused, but I would say that all the time there was quite a bit of also social science, which it's not really journalism, but it's things that are useful in journalism. And so what I found when I sort of jumped into journalism, I always had a sort of passion for writing, and I always enjoyed it. So that's kind of what made the transition more natural. But I found that picking up the skills of writing and sort of producing content and working at a publisher, that took a little bit of time, but frankly, having knowledge of other sectors actually proved to be more useful in terms of, writing, you know, content that would be appreciated by experts and things like that, and being able to dive deeper into the topic. So I initially did a lot of business reporting. So I was the economics reporter, the business reporter, that kind of stuff. I did the macroeconomic updates and what that meant for the economy, and interviewed lots of business leaders. So there was a natural transition. I'm originally from Poland, but I also have a Australian nationality, so I'm a dual. I grew up a little bit all over the place: Poland, U.S., Germany, Australia, and France.
And you,
My dad's a math professor, and it was after the wall came down, there was a big demand for physicists and mathematicians from the Eastern Bloc, so he kind of caught that wave, and we followed him.
I see. Okay. What's your best language is what?
To be frank, at this point, I think I'm mostly English, but sort of English, Polish, and French are on a similar level, followed by Russian.
Okay. All right. Um, are you an optimist for journalism?
I definitely, yeah, no doubt about it.
Well, of course, if you look at Eastern Europe and what's going on with journalism in Eastern Europe, you could be a pessimist.
Look, there is pressure being put. Like, my position is like this. Basically, there is pressure applied, and in different countries, there's it's gone to different lengths. Hungary is a disaster, you know. But that said, my sort of key hypothesis is that the single biggest sin of media, or the single biggest weakness of media, comes down to the fact that we just don't have money. Because if we had money, all of the other problems become much more manageable, right? You're getting sued by companies, throw good lawyers at them. You're not able to reach your technology drops, right? The print no longer works. You need to make a transition. All right, invest in consultants, do the transition, right? And you can go down the line, and even if it doesn't solve all the problems that media are facing now become more manageable when you have a lot of resources. And so the sort of the core, the primary problem is that we ran out of money, right? And if you look at, for example, what happened with the banks, right? And this is sort of where I spent quite a bit of time in working in the banking sector, in both investment banking and as a consultant. They had the same thing as media, right? Retail branches used to bring in money, and then they became money pits, right? The customers used to be captive to local providers, and all of a sudden fintechs sort of opened up the doors and everyone can shop around. Millennials started to use banks in a different way than they did previously, right? The package kind of disintegrated into some. But what the difference between media and banking, because the journey actually is quite similar, right? If you sort of take a macro picture, the difference is that banks had the money and the foresight to do something about it. And then some of them have not adapted that well. And nobody is crying about them because there is not that much sympathy for the banks that have disappeared as there is for the publications that have disappeared. But those that invested into their digital transformation have been successful. And so the reason why I'm an optimist, and sorry for the really long entry into this, but the reason why I'm an optimist is I think we went through the first apocalypse in terms of the business model, and a lot of the media died, and a lot of, hopefully some lessons were learned. But I think now we have another jump in terms of revenue models with the rise of reader revenue, but also a change in a lot of features on the market, which give media a new opportunity. Even though they completely lost the previous battles, they can sort of fight again. And I think that even though there's probably consolidation in the future, which means that I'm not optimistic about all media, I think the media as an industry, publishing as an industry, has better days ahead. Maybe not the best days, but certainly better than the last 10 to 15 years. And with the injection of new resources, the ability to invest into new technologies, whether it's AI or, whatever, that is a chance for media to re-seize the initiative. And that's what leads to my optimism.
You mentioned AI. How does journalism take advantage of AI? And also the challenge of AI in terms of the absolute flood of automated junk and propaganda and so forth, fake news, deep fakes and all that stuff. It's actually kind of scary. What do you see in terms of journalism reacting to that, particularly the automated, almost militarized propaganda, disinformation campaigns?
So I don't want to use the word cynical because I don't think that's not quite it. But I think there is a sort of practicality that we need to keep in mind here. So first of all, so what you're saying is really true and relevant. But the question is, from whose perspective are we looking at this? Is it society? Is it media as an industry? Or is it individual media companies? And I think one of the challenges is that as media, we have sometimes taken on, the global challenges, assuming that media equals society, and we can't really deal with them, right? We don't have the resources. We don't have the financial or the intellectual firepower. I mean, let's be honest, right? a lot of great minds have left the sector, and great minds, maybe even more importantly, have not entered it because there were so few opportunities, right? So, there are great people working in the media industry, but it's nothing compared to how many there would be if there were the sort of the financial promises that, for example, social media would have offered, right? So to be honest, I think if we take the global responsibilities, I'm not sure that's on us, right? And that's kind of because I don't think we quite can. I think we can be one of the stakeholders helping solve the problem, but we definitely can't be the only one. I think from the perspective of the individual media, like if I'm a media manager now, I'm not sure that I really spend time on it, right? Like first feed, yourself, then your family, then feed the world, right? Like you can't, and if I'm hungry and my family is hungry, I'm not going to be able to solve the problem of the world, right? So if I'm an individual media manager, I probably don't care. I'm looking to find my audience, my sort of loyal audience, like the Financial Times, right? The Financial Times is not running around trying to solve problems. It's found its audience, it makes money, and and it sees where it can contribute a little bit, but they don't sort of try to take on the global challenges. Now, let's put that to the side. I think when it comes to the global challenges, like let's be optimistic and assume that we can actually have some resources to throw at this. I think this is a place where media probably needs to partner with governments and international organizations or pieces of government and international organization whose purpose it is to solve these big issues. I don't think they can do it themselves. And look, the other challenge is that probably means that the solution looks really different in Sweden than it does in Poland. In Poland, the government is not a partner, right? In Sweden, it might be, but yeah.
So I think that's a good way to look at it. Here at the university, when we start talking about the role of media in society, we start thinking about, well, media used to be a key pillar of democracy and now it's not, and therefore we have to reestablish the media as a pillar of democracy. And so we do get into conversations where we look at the role of journalism and how it's at the moment extremely weak because of what you mentioned, the resource issue.
No, but I think that makes sense, and I think it's good that universities are doing that. I'm just not sure that I work a lot with donors supporting media in lots of different governments, and I feel like you need a bit of a reality check about this startup of 10 people in name it, Kyrgyzstan, Armenia, whatever. They're not really gonna have, like, you're really, we're flattered, but we don't have that much impact, right? We can mobilize a small portion of the society at best, and maybe have a sort of a coordinating role. What I think is actually interesting, what I would sort of point to as one thing that makes me hopeful is I actually think that the role of academia might be underplayed. And I think what has been happening around Media City Bergen, and who they recently started this partnership as well with Cardiff University, is very interesting because this is a place where different media, different NGOs, international organizations, business and government come together for the purpose of funding various research in the directions of AI, ML, and so forth.
Is this in Norway?
This is in Norway, and as you know, I remember from my days in political science that the first thing that you don't do is don't assume that Scandinavian solutions are applicable elsewhere. Is like That was rule number one. The world is not Denmark, but I think they've really found something very interesting there. And maybe just one other additional comment. I think media, generally speaking, are victims of looking for global and perfect solutions rather than iterating and refining things that work a little bit. And the thing is, if you keep improving a product by 10%, after 10 years, it's amazing, right?
Yes.
If you keep ditching it and looking for something that is going to solve 90%, let's not even dream about 100, the chances that you find a silver bullet are really, really small. You might, from time to time you do, but that's really rare. And I feel like there's so many times that we kind of start an initiative, I see somebody launch a global initiative and it sort of ramps up and then it just fizzles out because you can never scale it that quickly as people's emotions would want.
One more thing on the recommendations for students. What do you think they should study? Or how should they be thinking about their careers?
So, and are they part of the journalism faculty, or is that, or in general?
At our university, there, La Facultad de Comunicación it includes a lot of people who are in marketing and advertising, and also we have a big sector. The part that I'm in is focused on the business of media.
I think one thing is that they should definitely spend some time to understand how digital ecosystems work. And I don't want this to sound like a slightly, more just a twist on the learn to code, but learn to code. Look, you need to understand the language that these people speak, because they are building the ecosystem in which you will make it or break it, right? Like it's really important to understand the language that they talk. I think really what I have found is that a diversity of experience is incredibly helpful. So to give one example, media write a lot about governments and corporations as, entities that have a single vision and plan something, and like reporting on Russia is full of Putin wants this and Putin wants that, and and I mean, I don't know, this is probably more in the interest of good journalism than journalism that sells, because Putin wants this article sell well, like they're popular and they'll excite people and so forth. The story is more nuanced. Articles don't sell as well. But if you actually want to understand what's happening, you need to spend some time in different types of organizations. And because the world is very complicated, and there is almost never such a thing as a single vision and a single thing. Like most of the things that happen by accident, to be honest, right? I know that's not a great story.
No, I agree with you. Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. I don't know if you've read that book, but he talks about that.
Exactly. And if you spend even a summer at a big corporation, you'll understand that it's complete chaos, and someone has a priority and something shows up on a calendar and hope something gets delivered. And it's pretty random, like what actually happens and what doesn't happen. Like people try to steer this process and spend a lot of money and time and human resources on actually managing big organizations. But it's very, guide a group of 10 tourists through a tourist attraction, and tell me about how humans can sort of coordinate big initiatives, right? Like you will immediately see how much chaos is there. And I think sort of getting that experience of working at different organizations is incredibly valuable to give you perspective as a journalist. Now, in terms of, I think the only other thing that I'd add, I would probably have to think about this a bit more, but I think in investing time in sort of, there's a lot of those. The World Economic Forum comes out with them, but there's a couple of other ones. I know Oxford does good research on that. Like, what are the skills that are going to be valued in 10 years versus the skills that were valued, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and so forth. I think usually that list of skills is pretty heavy on things like creative problem solving and things like that. I think they need to spend more time on that because a big problem of media, and I think that's why we missed the first transformation, is that once you jump in, you're living by deadlines, right? And everyone ends up living that way. And so you're always chasing the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And what happens is their time horizon and their ability to think strategically gets cut down to a period of several weeks. And the level of problem solving and thinking that you have at that level, there's some helpful things that you can learn, but it's also very limited and it's very limiting. And I think spending time on jobs that require, deep thinking, problem solving, communication skills, team management skills, that kind of stuff, that's things that are very rare in media. And I think if you come into a media organization with those skills, you can really shine quickly.
So Janomics, that's your full-time gig now? Is that how you spend most of your time on that or not?
That's about 70% of my time, yeah.
And Janomics is how old?
We're going on 2 years in about a month.
And so you're a media consultancy, is that how you would describe that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the very simple way to characterize this and sort of the whole strategic basis of it is, so I spent 3 years at McKinsey in London, and that was a great experience also in terms of seeing lots of different industries. But what I saw is that most consulting companies, big consulting companies, don't work with media for two reasons. Media don't pay enough. And the other one is that consultants are afraid of media. Because if you work at a media company, you're working in the open. And you fire somebody at a bank, no one cares. You fire someone at a media company, that person has 50,000 Twitter followers, right? And so they get very nervous around media people. And because Janomics, the team is mostly either former media people or people who work in related fields, they're not as stressed about it. And by stripping some of the overhead that you would have at a classical consulting company, we can bring down the fees to a level that is interesting for the media perspective. So the idea is basically build the McKinsey of media, right? Like in very early stages, and with all sort of, I don't want to overstate it. We're still humble, but that's kind of the idea. That's the concept that we're trying to do.
Jakub and I talked about some other related topics, such as how independent media are under attack in Central and Eastern Europe today, and a bit more about his home country of Poland, which has a unique relationship with the European Union. I've written all that up in a blog post, and I'll include links to that and other related material in the notes to this video. Thanks for watching, and remember, it's another day of opportunity.